Hello and welcome to the Ramblings of a 42-Year-Old Man. Chris Smith here with you again today, and we are going to just have a quick ramble about a kind of a documentary series that I've been watching. This is called In Search of the Darkness, and what it is pretty much focusing year by year on horror movies in the 80s. So start with 1980 and going all the way up to 1989. It picks 2 or 3 movies out of each year and talks a little bit about them. And what's awesome about the series, so far there's been 3 of them, and each one they do the years 80 through 89. So in Search of the Darkness Part 1, you're getting the big hitters, the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets. You've got the late 80s Halloween sequels. You got Chucky sneaking in there near the end of the year. You got Evil Dead and Reanimator, and kind of more well-known entries throughout the year. So you're getting through all those kind of heavy hitters, and then by the time you're getting to Part 2, you're getting into a little more maybe a little more low key, not quite as well known. Things like The Burning and Critters and things that weren't necessarily maybe the mainstream public knew, but a lot of cult movies like Army of Darkness and things like that as well. But then you start getting into like Part 3, and then you're getting into like really obscure stuff, like stuff that even I hadn't really known about, like you got I'm trying to think of the sorority babes at the Bolorama and stuff, like really crazy 80s movies. The horror back in the 80s was they were coming out with new movies every week. And so by the time you're getting into Part 3, you're getting some really obscure stuff. And it sounds like they're going to stop with the 80s in Part 3, and I think they're going to continue this series, and they're going to move into the 90s. So I'm pretty excited to see how that would go. A lot of movies, the early 90s was kind of tough. You'd have some goofiness like Dr. Giggles and stuff, but you had some of the earlier Chucky sequels in that time that kind of stood out and things. And then of course you had Scream, which we've talked about recently with all the new stuff, but that kind of kicked off the late 90s into gear. So very excited to see where this documentary series will go into the future. But Parts 1, 2, and 3, big focus on the 80s, a lot of the 80s slasher craze, a lot of the kind of cult movies, Sam Raimi coming up with, Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, even Darkman. I think Darkman might sneak into the 90s episodes. We'll see how that works. But, you got things like Reanimator and Stuart Gordon's movies, and a lot of cool stuff, especially the first. Obviously, the Part 1, you're getting a lot of the more well-known things. Most people who are watching this video probably recognize a lot of the names on Part 1. Part 2, you might have to be a little more of a horror fan to really know a lot of these ones. And then by Part 3, like I said, even the horror fan like me had some trouble knowing what some of these ones were that they were talking about. But a lot of fun to watch. There's video clips with them. There's interviews with all the actors, a lot of interviews with some of the directors, a lot of the creative forces that went into making these movies. And then you also have a lot of fans and media, reporters and stuff doing interviews as well, kind of talking about the impacts that these movies had. And you got people like Corey Taylor. He's the lead singer of Slipknot. He talks about how, watching these horror movies when he was a kid, the band Slipknot is very well known for like wearing really crazy masks and stuff when they're doing their music. You can see the influences that these horror movies had on people. So it's cool to see people like that come on and do a little interview. So a lot of fun. So all 3 of these, In Search of the Darkness, Parts 1, Part 2, and Part 3 are streaming now on Shudder. I'm hopeful that the Part 4 comes out pretty soon, and we'll look at some of the 90s stuff, and I'll be really excited to catch that as well. So if you're a horror fan, definitely must watch, especially anybody who has any sort of interest in the 80s horror boom. For those who aren't, maybe not for you, but I definitely enjoy them quite a bit. So again, that is In Search of the Darkness. There's 3 parts currently, and you can find those on the Shudder streaming service if you have subscription to that channel. Thank you for watching. Everybody have a great night, and thank you for listening to me ramble.